Hello, everyone. Mr. Howard coming at you again from coronavirus quarantine. Down here in my guest room, as usual. Still continuing the read aloud with analysis from the picture of Dorian Gray. For anybody who wants to listen, just throwing it up on YouTube. I figure I'm an educator. What I'm going to do is keep educating. That's how it goes. We are going to be reading Chapter 5 today, but I want to talk about Chapter 4 briefly. So in Chapter 4, Dorian met, hey, sorry about the shaking. That is my cat, Crosby. He is in here with me today. I think he's going to go get up in the window. Hey, Cros, say hi. Crosby? No, nothing. Fair enough. I think he's going to get up in the window, and maybe I can angle this thing so we get a cat in there. Yeah, there he is, hanging out. He'll just settle down there and stare out the window. Anyway, we read Chapter 4, in which Dorian met what he calls the love of his life, what Lord Henry calls his first love, Sybil Vane, an actress who was playing Juliet. And we saw a lot of interesting sort of parallel structures and questions about art and the meaning of art and love. And, so we started the story out with Basil, who is, in love with Dorian in an artistic way, I guess. Dorian's young and beautiful and charming and perfect and innocent and all of this stuff. And Basil's capturing all of that in his art and in his pictures, ultimately creating the picture of Dorian Gray. And then we meet Lord Henry, who is also interested in Dorian in an artistic way. He doesn't necessarily like Dorian as a person. He likes Dorian for his beauty and all of these other things, but he's also interested in creating a masterpiece, and the masterpiece that he wants to create is life. Lord Henry is an artist of life, like using psychology to manipulate people and stuff. And so he's creating a picture of Dorian Gray through Dorian Gray's own life. And then we've got Dorian, who has been influenced by Henry and by Basil in their own ways, and who seems to be very interested in art as well. He goes into this theater and he finds Sybil Vane, who's young and beautiful and very much like Dorian was before he was influenced by Lord Henry. And she's an artist. I think Dorian says she has consummate art instinct in her. And she portrays these Shakespearean heroines on stage, and so he falls in love with her. But we question, is he in love with her for who she is or for the art that she portrays? And so his love for her is very much akin to the love that Basil had for Dorian, or that Lord Henry seems to have for Dorian. And there's something going on here. And then we've got the whole innocence thing. After the play, Dorian goes behind the stage to the green room where he meets Sybil Vane for the first time, and they look at each other, it says, as children. And so this innocent sort of thing continuing to go on. And at the end of the chapter, we find out that Dorian has proposed marriage to Sybil Vane and that he's going to marry her. So we talked about Sybil Vane's name, Sybil being a prophetess, Vane being vanity. I think there's something going on there. But we see Dorian's romantic side here. He's doing the right thing. He's in love with this girl, so he's going to marry her. That's obviously not what Lord Henry would do. He's very cynical about marriage and talks about that a lot. So in Chapter 5, we are going to meet Sybil Vane and her situation. I think it's a relatively short chapter, but we shift perspectives entirely. We go away from the big three, Basil, Lord Henry, and Dorian, and we move into a new perspective for a few minutes. So we get a sense of who Sybil Vane is from this chapter, and I think that's going to be important. So, without further ado, I'm going to start reading and stop and give you a little analysis here and there. I turned too far. Apologies for this. All right, Chapter 5. "Mother, mother, I am so happy," whispered the girl, burying her face in the lap of the faded, tired-looking woman who, with back turned toward the shrill, intrusive light, was sitting in the one armchair that their dingy sitting room contained. "I am so happy," she repeated, "and you must be happy too." Mrs. Vane winced and put her thin, bismuth-whitened hands on her daughter's head. "Happy?" she echoed. "I am only happy, Sybil, when I see you act. You must not think of anything but your acting. Mr. Isaacs has been very good to us, and we owe him money. Pause. That must be what Dorian calls the hideous Jew, the guy who owns a movie theater. He is not a gentleman, Mother, and I hate the way he talks to me, said the girl, rising to her feet and going over to the window. I don't know how we can manage without him, answered the elder woman querulously. Sybil Vane tossed her head and laughed. We don't want him any more, Mother. Prince Charming rules life for us now. Then she paused. A rose shook in her blood and shadowed her cheeks. Quick breath parted the petals of her lips. Look at how, the floral imagery continues. This floral motif has been going on throughout the entire story. And roses are associated with love throughout history, so there's something going on there, too. They trembled. Some southern wind of passion swept over her and stirred the dainty folds of her dress. I love him, she said simply. Foolish child, was the parrot phrase flung in answer. The waving of crooked, false-jeweled fingers gave an added grotesqueness to the words. The girl laughed again. The joy of a caged bird was in her voice. Her eyes caught the melody and echoed it in radiance, then closed for a moment as though to hide their secret. When they opened, a mist of a dream had passed across them. Thin-lipped wisdom spoke at her from the worn chair. Now it's a metaphor. The woman is obviously an old mother, but wisdom is capitalized here. So she's being, said that she's wisdom. It's interesting, too, that she was seen as grotesque just a minute ago with fake jewels on her hands. Is this a commentary by Oscar Wilde on the poor? Affecting richness, affecting wealth? I don't know. Sorry. Thin-lipped wisdom spoke at her from the worn chair, hinted at prudence, quoted from that book of cowardice whose author apes the names of common sense. She did not listen. She was free in her prison of passion. It's a metaphor, too. Her Prince Charming, was with her. She had called on memory to remake him. She had sent her soul to search for him, and it had brought him back. His kiss burned again on her mouth. Her eyelids were warm with his breath. Then wisdom altered its method and spoke of espial and discovery. This young man might be rich. If so, marriage should be thought of. Against the shell of her ear broke waves of worldly cunning. The arrows of craft shot by her. She saw the thin lips moving and smiled. All right, so the mom's a gold digger. I think that's pretty clear. But she's smart. She's wisdom, right? So the narrator here is telling us that the smart move for Sybil Vane is to marry Dorian Gray, because if he's got money, it gets her out of her hole. It gets her out of her horrible life. The worldly silence troubled her. Mother, Mother, she cried, why does he love me so much? I know why I love him. I love him because he is like what love himself should be. But why? What does he see in me? I am not worthy of him. And yet, why? I cannot tell. Though I feel so much beneath him, I don't feel humble. I feel proud, terribly proud. Mother, did you love Father as much as I love Prince Charming? The elder woman grew pale beneath the coarse powder that daubed her cheeks, and her dry lips twitched with a spasm of pain. Sybil rushed to her, flung her arms around her neck, and kissed her. Forgive me, Mother, I know it pains you to talk about our father, but it only pains you because you loved him so much. Don't look so sad. I am as happy today as you were 20 years ago. Ah, let me be happy forever. All right, so 20 years ago. That makes Sybil 20 years old, right? Or thereabouts. My child, you are... No, I guess Dorian said she was 17 earlier, so maybe, the relationship between her mom and Sybil's dad lasted a little while longer. I guess if you think about these things, they come across. My child, you are far too young to think of falling in love. Besides, what do you know of this young man? You don't even know his name. The whole thing is most inconvenient. And really, when James is going away to Australia, and I have so much to think of, I must say that you should have shown more consideration. However, as I said before, if he is rich... Pause. There's a gold digging again, but James, okay, that's a brother. We're going to find out in a second, James Vane. And he's planning to go away to Australia. That seems sort of weird, but this is a pretty normal thing in Victorian literature. There was an Australian gold rush, and, I don't know how many books. Lady Audley's Secret, The Importance of Being Earnest. There's a number of these books where characters go away to Australia and they come back rich, or, stuff like that happens. So going to Australia was kind of a thing in Victorian literature. I don't think a ton of people did it. Certainly it was mostly a colony where criminals were sent, or people in debtor's prison. But whatever. Mother, let me be happy. Mrs. Vane glanced at her, and with one of those false theatrical gestures that so often become a mode of second nature to a stage player, clasped her in her arms. At this moment the door opened, and a young lad with rough brown hair came into the room. He was thick-set of figure, and his hands and feet were large, and somewhat clumsy in movement. He was not so finely bred as his sister. One would hardly have guessed the close relationship that existed between them. Mrs. Vane fixed her eyes on him and intensified her smile. She mentally elevated her son to the dignity of an audience. She felt sure the tableau was interesting. Pause. She elevated her son to the dignity of an audience. Mrs. Vane sees the world as a play, and that she's an actor. And I think this is important because it's very much the same way that Sybil views the world, as you'll see as this goes on. So on some level, Sybil actually views the world as art. And it's not because she's experienced, it's because she's innocent. She doesn't understand the complexities of the world. She sees it in this light. Anyway, we'll keep going. You might keep some of your kisses from me, Sybil, I think, said the lad with his good-natured grumble. How but you don't like being kissed, Jim, she said. You are a dreadful old bear. And she ran across the room and hugged him. James Vane looked into his sister's face with tenderness. I want you to come out with me for a walk, Sybil. I don't suppose I shall ever see this horrid London again. I'm sure I don't want to. My son, don't say such dreadful things, murmured Mrs. Vane, taking up a tawdry theatrical dress with a sigh and beginning to patch it. She felt a little disappointed that he had not joined the group. It would have increased the theatrical picturesqueness of the situation. Why not, Mother? I mean it. You pain me, my son. I trust you will return from Australia in a position of affluence. All she ever talks about is money. I believe there is no society of any kind in the colonies, nothing that I would call society. So when you have made your fortune, you must come back and assert yourself in London. Society, muttered the lad. I don't want to know anything about that. I should like to make money to take you and Sybil off the stage. I hate it. Oh, Jim, said Sybil, laughing. How unkind you are. But are you really going for a walk with me? That would be nice. I was afraid you were going to say goodbye to some of your friends, to Tom Hardy, who gave you that hideous pipe, or Ned Langton, who makes fun of you for smoking it. It is very sweet of you to let me have your last afternoon. Where shall we go? Let us go to the park. I am too shabby, he answered, frowning. Only swell people go to the park. Nonsense, Jim, she whispered, stroking the sleeve of his coat. He hesitated for a moment. Very well, he said at last, but don't be too long dressing. She danced out of the door. One could hear her singing as she ran up the stairs. Her little feet pattered overhead. This, is just a little bit of characterization. She's flighty, she's aloof, she's in a dream world, she's always happy. She's like some sort of Disney princess or something. Cinderella, some sort of a connection going on there. It's like a fairy tale to her. I mean, look at the word she used, Prince Charming. That goes directly back, what is that, Snow White? To that Snow White story. And tells you something about what's going on in her headspace and how she views the world. He walked up and down the room two or three times. Then he turned to the still figure in the chair. Mother, are my things ready? Quite ready, James, she answered, keeping her eyes on her work. She's avoiding eye contact with him. Something's up. For some months past, she had felt ill at ease when she was alone with this rough, stern son of hers. Her shallow, secret nature was troubled when their eyes met. She used to wonder if he suspected anything. The silence, for he made no other observation, became intolerable to her. She began to complain. Women defend themselves by attacking, just as they attack by sudden and strange surrenders. I hope you will be contented, James, with your seafaring life, she said. You must remember that it is your own choice. You might have entered a solicitor's office. Solicitors are a very respectable class, and in the county often dine with the best families. Solicitors are lawyers, so she tried to get her son to be a lawyer, but he's going to be a sailor, and she's not happy about that. It's a class-conscious kind of a thing. I hate offices and I hate clerks, he replied. But you're quite right. I have chosen my own life. All I can say is, watch over Sybil. Don't let her come to any harm. Mother, you must watch over her. James, you really talk very strangely. Of course I watch over Sybil. I hear a gentleman comes every night to the theater and goes behind to talk to her. Is that right? What about that? You are speaking about things you don't understand, James. In the profession, we are accustomed to receive a great deal of most gratifying attention. I myself used to receive many bouquets at one time. That was when acting was really understood. As for Sybil, I do not know at present whether her attachment is serious or not. But there is no doubt that the young man in question is a perfect gentleman. He is always most polite to me. Besides, he has the appearance of being rich, and the flowers he sends are lovely. You don't know his name, though, said the lad harshly. No, answered his mother with a placid